Hey there, pen fans, Brian Goulet here from gouletpens.com. If you just got yourself a TWSBI ECO and you're wondering how you should take it apart, or maybe you took it apart and you're wondering how to get it back together, either way, this video is for you. The TWSBI ECO is a fantastic fountain pen for users of all experience levels, though it's particularly popular among new users due to its affordable price, its reliability, and ease of maintenance. One unique thing that TWSBI does is give you tools and instructions to remove the piston mechanism out of the pen, which gives you the opportunity and the responsibility to disassemble and reassemble your pen. Now, this is both a blessing and a curse, as some pen fans have an easier time disassembling it and reassembling it than others. And that's what this video is meant to show you. Now, I'm gonna go through first with the ideal process of taking it apart and putting it back together for easy step-by-step reference. Then in the back half of the video, I'm gonna show you all the potential things that can trip you up and how to fix them if you find yourself getting stuck. Let's start off by talking about why you'd even want to take your pen apart. Well, firstly, you don't have to. If you know that you're challenged with tinkering and you're kind of hesitant to do this, just don't. Just don't. You can enjoy your ECO just like any other piston filling pen and never take it apart. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, so keep that in mind right off the bat. Now, there are three main reasons why you may want to take it apart, other than just the fact that it's possible. The first reason would be that it makes thorough cleaning easier. It's not hard to clean the pen normally just by flushing and filling the pen with clean water, but because it's a demonstrator, you may find yourself wanting to get it perfectly cleaned out when changing colors, and that's totally up to you. It's not required. Now, sometimes when you see a slight tinge of color from a previous ink inside the pen, it might bother you, but the majority of the time, it's not even the pen itself that's stained. It's the thin coating of silicone grease on the inside of the barrel that might be stained. And that will only remove with a physical scrubbing inside the pen. Now, the vast majority of the time, you won't even see this color tinge when you go to fill your pen with your next ink. But if you want to get it squeaky clean, if you know it's going to bother you, then you'd likely need to take it apart for that reason. The second reason to take it apart would be to clean the pen faster. Now, if you're used to using a bulb syringe with your cartridge converter pens, you can easily get spoiled by being able to flush your pen in under a minute. And pistons may feel like a bit of a chore, like it takes you longer. Now, by removing the piston mechanism on your ECO, you can flush it out just like you would a cartridge converter, which I won't lie, is pretty appealing. It's the main reason why I disassemble most of my ECOs. The third reason is for maintenance. Now, with normal use, your ECO is going to last a long time without any special maintenance needed. However, over time and repeated use, the silicone grease on it will, maybe break down, not work quite as well, and that rubber piston seal, it's not going to move quite as smoothly as when it was new, making it feel just a little more resistant as you're operating it. By taking it apart, you can re-grease that piston seal, and TWSBI even supplies their own silicone grease, or you could use your own, and it'll keep it smooth and operating like new for years and years. So with all this in mind, let's go step by step in removing and replacing the ECO piston as TWSBI instructs. To disassemble and reassemble, you'll only need two things: your ECO pen and the red TWSBI wrench that comes with it. Now, this is an 8mm wrench. It's only about 1mm thick, and it's sort of a specialized wrench, so hang on to them with your ECO even if you throw out the rest of your packaging. Though if you're like me, you'll probably end up with a drawer full of these things. You can also use the 8mm metal TWSBI wrench that comes with any other TWSBI pen. They'll work just the same. All right, here's how to take your ECO apart step by step. Step 1, expel any remaining ink and flush your pen with clean water. Now, it's best to work with an empty and clean pen unless you're disassembling it expressly for the purpose of cleaning it out. Step 2, remove the cap and set it aside. Step 3, twist the filler knob counter-clockwise until the piston is all the way down towards the grip of the pen. Step 4, insert your wrench into the notches on the black piston mechanism. Step 5, this one's really important and where most people cause themselves issues. Once you put the wrench on, twist the knob back down in a clockwise motion until it pinches down slightly on the wrench. This will cause the piston to back away around a centimeter from where it was fully extended. This not only helps hold the wrench on the piston mechanism as you're unscrewing it, but it also makes sure that the entire mechanism will come out and stay in one piece. Step 6, remove the piston mechanism. Hold the ECO body with one hand and turn the wrench clockwise 9 full rotations. You can then pull the mechanism straight out of the pen in one piece and leave it intact. Now this is really important. You don't need to take the piston mechanism apart.
You don't need to take the piston mechanism apart. You don't need to take the piston mechanism apart.
You can keep it all together in one piece. There's really no benefit to disassembling at this point, and it's just gonna start to get confusing for you. But if you end up doing it anyway, I'm gonna cover that later in the video, and you can watch it there, but just know that you have no need to take the mechanism all the way apart, and I don't recommend that you do. So once you have that apart, you can do whatever you need to. You can clean it, re-grease it, whatever. And I'll cover all those steps here in just a minute, but let's talk about reassembling it now. Here are the steps to do that, one step at a time, but it's basically just doing everything we did, but in reverse. Step 1, insert the piston mechanism into the body. With the wrench attached to the piston, insert the rubber seal in the barrel and push the mechanism down until it stops. Step 2, screw the piston mechanism into the body. Turn the wrench counterclockwise 9 rotations until you feel resistance. Do not, and I repeat, do not over tighten this. That will put increased pressure on the threads, and that can weaken the plastic over time, causing cracks to form. You don't have to hulk this thing in place. Once it starts to feel tight, you can stop. Step 3, remove the wrench by first turning the filler knob counterclockwise just a little bit, enough to free up the wrench. Then you can simply slide the wrench off of the piston, and then you'll be good to fill your pen. You can operate the piston just like normal.
Wow, Brian, that seems pretty simple. How could you possibly mess that up?
I'm glad you asked, Brian. There's lots of ways you can mess it up, and people do it all the time.
It's all good. We're gonna cover everything about how you could maybe get off track here, but I'm gonna show you the different situations that you might find yourself in and how to get out of them. Let's cover a couple of the most common oopsies that you might find yourself in. Oops number 1, you removed the piston, but the piston rod is still in the pen. This happens all the time. And basically it's when the piston rod is fully extended and then you unscrew the mechanism out of the body and the threads that grip the piston rod aren't holding onto it anymore and you've left the rod back in the pen. Trying to pull the rod out with your fingers is tough because it's set down in the pen. And I guess theoretically you could use a pair of needle nose pliers or something else really thin to kind of pinch it and get it out of there, but that's risky. You could damage the piston rod because it's just made of plastic. No, the simplest and the easiest thing to do is just to reinsert the piston mechanism back into the pen. Make sure the piston rod lines up with that shape of the end of the mechanism. Screw the mechanism back onto the pen in a counterclockwise rotation, and then when it's fully screwed on, then you turn the filler knob counterclockwise so it clamps down onto the wrench and it moves the piston slightly up. Now you've got that mechanism all in one piece. You can turn the wrench clockwise and remove it just like normal. Oops number 2, you've removed the piston mechanism, but it's no longer in one piece and you need to get it back together. So you remember earlier when I said that you don't need to take the mechanism apart? I'll say it again, truly you don't need to. But hey, things happen. Or maybe you were just curious and you wanted to see how it worked. I get it, I'm a tinkerer, I do the same thing. But now you've opened up a little Pandora's box and you need to understand how the parts of the piston mechanism all fit together in order to get it aligned like you need. So we're gonna cover a lot of different things. You could end up in all different situations, but basically you've disassembled some part of your mechanism and you're gonna have to get it all back together. So you have technically 5 parts to the piston. The rubber piston seal, which is going to be attached to the threaded piston rod. You have the filler knob, the piston housing, which has 2 sets of threads on the outside of it, and the piston rod shroud, which sits inside the piston housing. It's usually just completely hidden. Now the piston housing is static. That's what actually stays in place on the back of the pen, and it holds all the parts together. And the filler knob is going to screw up and down on that piece. The piston rod fits into the slotted end of the housing, and the piston rod shroud threads through the other end onto the piston rod. That's what actually makes the piston go up and down, is that piston rod and the shroud working together. That's really the heart of the whole mechanism. So the way that the piston mechanism is assembled is by first inserting the piston rod shroud into the open end of the housing on the back of it. It should just slide right in, very little friction. Then you screw the filler knob onto the housing by turning it clockwise, just threading it on there. Now as it screws on, there are detents that will fit between the piston rod shroud and the filler knob. You can sort of see them matching up together, especially if you have a demonstrator version. Now this means that when you turn the knob, the shroud is also going to be turning inside that housing. And because that shroud turns, the threads inside the shroud are going to match up to the piston rod and make it move up and down. That's sort of how the whole thing works. So the tricky part here is going to be that this filler knob, as you're turning it and screwing it down further onto the piston housing, you're turning it clockwise. And because it's turning the shroud, that means that when the piston rod is inserted, the piston rod will be moving inversely to the filler knob in opposite directions. So this means that there's a very specific placement that needs to happen where the piston rod is going to fit in, so that the end result, when everything is screwed together and assembled, that filler knob is going to be seated fully on the housing, while the piston seal is just about 1 millimeter or 2 away from the piston housing. It's fairly easy to have it where that piston is either sticking too far out or too far in, and then the pen's not going to work as intended. It is very confusing, I know. Hopefully it's not that confusing. Hopefully being able to show it here will make it a little easier, but rewatch this as many times as you need to. And I will note here that we have a customer care team here that troubleshoots this kind of stuff all the time, and they are more than happy to help you should you find yourself needing like a little more personalized instruction. Okay, so now knowing the end state of where we need this mechanism to be, here are my tips for making this as least painful as possible, going step by step. Step number 1, make sure the piston seal is seated fully onto the piston rod and set it aside. Step 2, insert the piston rod shroud into the open end of the piston housing on the back of it. Step 3, in a clockwise motion, screw the filler knob onto the piston housing over top of the piston shroud until you have a 2.5 millimeter gap between the end of the piston knob and the thickest part of that piston housing. That sounds very specific because it is. Now, you can use 2 US dimes stacked on top of one another to get the right spacing, or take a 2.5 millimeter hex wrench or an Allen wrench if you have one of these handy. You can use these somewhat relatively common household items to get that proper spacing between the knob and the housing, since, trying to gauge 2.5 millimeters exactly is kind of hard to eyeball it. Step 4, insert the piston rod into the slotted end of the piston housing and hold it there with your finger. Step 5, turn the filler knob clockwise until it's seated fully onto the housing. When the filler knob is fully seated, you should have about a 2.5 millimeter spacing between the piston seal and the piston housing. If the knob is fully seated and the piston seal is too far away, that means you might need to try this again. So inserting the rod a little bit deeper. I like to do this by holding the piston down while I unscrew the filler knob until it kind of overextends and you get a little click, and then you try screwing it back together again. It pretty much just takes some trial and error, but eventually you can get that spacing right. Now, if the piston itself is all the way down on the housing, but the filler knob is loose and it's not all the way attached to the housing, you're gonna need to disassemble it and try again. This time with the knob starting just a tad closer to that final closed position of the housing. Step 6, once you have the final assembled housing, you're gonna unscrew the filler knob slowly, just enough so that you can get your wrench in place. Make sure that that piston rod stays installed and doesn't fall out. And then tighten the knob down on the wrench. Step 7, insert the piston mechanism into the body of the pen and turn the wrench counterclockwise 9 rotations until it's gently tightened, and then you're all set. Okay, before I end the video, I'm gonna show you some pro tips for cleaning and greasing the pen, sort of skipping over the step-by-step of the disassembly and assembly, since you've mastered that at this point, for the sake of brevity. Expel the excess ink from your pen, but you don't have to clean it out. Take your dirty but empty ECO, remove the cap, and go through all the steps to remove that piston mechanism that we just covered. Now, once you're left with just the body, you can flush the pen with a bulb syringe just like you would any cartridge converter pen. You can fill the bulb syringe and just flush it on through there as many times as you want. Now, if there's ink on the walls of the pen and it's still kind of like got its color tinge to it, you can scrub it with a cotton swab to clean it up, from the open end of the pen where the mechanism would normally be. And then just rinse off the piston seal, and once you're happy with how clean the pen is overall, go through all the steps to reassemble it like we just covered. Greasing the piston seal. Now this is generally best to do when you have a clean pen. So you can do this in the cleaning process, or if you have your pen already cleaned, remove the piston mechanism from the pen, and then using either the TWSBI supplied grease, which is relatively thin, or another silicone grease like our thicker Goulet silicone grease, you can apply it with a toothpick or a cotton swab to that rubber piston seal. You put this in between the two rings on the seal, get a little bit on the rings, but most of it's gonna be kind of in between them. And then you want to use enough to cover it all, but don't glob it on there so thick that it's gonna smear everywhere when you go to reinstall it in the pen. If you're not quite sure how much to put on, err on the side of putting too little, because if you don't use enough, then it'll just feel like you haven't really done anything. But if you put too much, it can sort of glob in there and get places you don't want to, get all in the threads. It's a little bit more trouble to clean it out extra than it is to add a little bit more. But either way, it's not an exact science. Carefully reinsert it back into the pen and just do your reassembly process like normal. Now, there's no set amount of time that you need to adhere to when re-greasing the piston like this. You definitely don't need to do it every time you take the pen apart. Basically, you just do it when you feel like you're having to work a little bit harder than normal to get that piston going. But you got pretty much freedom to do it however as much as you want. And there you have it. I hope this was thorough enough to cover whatever situation that you find yourself in, but also concise and simple enough for you to kind of get it all. If you have further questions, which I could imagine you have, please rewatch this as many times as you need, there's no shame, and feel free to ask maybe in the comments, or if you want to reach out to our team at gouletpens.com, you can get some kind of one-on-one help. We got lots of other great things at gouletpens.com for your fountain pen, ink, and paper needs, so be sure to check that out. And we also have literally thousands of other helpful pen videos here on our YouTube channel. I encourage you to subscribe and watch more of those as you need help with your fountain pens. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.